seated. So today is Veterans Day, where we celebrate, remember, and honor all those who have served and continue to serve our nation through our military. Therefore, I think it's relevant for all of us today, on this day, to reflect upon the word service in general. Not just service to our country, but specifically, what does service mean to us as people who follow Jesus? For we use the word service a lot in the Christian faith. There in your bulletin, in our order of worship, it's the final part there, where we say our worship has ended, but our service begins. It's in our mission statement that St. Mark's is a place where all people can explore their call to service. And so since we use this word so often, it's probably helpful that we know what it means. And I think the best way that we can arrive at a definition of service, and specifically what does it mean, is by looking at three different stories of three veterans who are also Christians who sort of exemplify and hold up for us what service actually means. So the first veteran and Christian I want to look at this morning is named Martin of Tours. Martin was a bishop back in the 4th century. And on the 11th of November in our liturgical calendar here in the Episcopal Church, it's Martin's feast day, where we celebrate him and think about him. Now, before Martin was a bishop, he was a soldier in the Roman army. And he had been thinking, kind of vacillating back and forth, about becoming a Christian, about becoming a follower of Jesus. And then one day, as he was out with his regiment doing the things that soldiers do, he passed a beggar. And he had no money or food to give this beggar, but he noticed that the beggar had no coat. So he took his coat off and tore it in half and gave half of it to the beggar. That night he had a dream. And in that dream, Christ came to him wearing the half of the coat that he had given to the beggar. So Martin took that as a sign that he was to become a Christian. And so he did that, and he became a Christian, and he was promptly baptized. And at the end of his next military campaign, he left the Roman army and entered the Christian faith, specifically for ministry and ordination and all those things. Now in 371, he was elected the Bishop of Tours, and it was mainly a pagan diocese there in the Roman Empire. But his life and his manner of living convinced a lot of people to change from paganism and convert to Christianity. In fact, there's one story that's told in a kind of Elijah versus the prophet Baal sort of feel, where a group of pagan priests who worshipped a fir tree said that they would follow Jesus if Martin would stand in the path of where their tree would fall if they chopped it down and it didn't hit him. Which seems like a really bad idea. But Martin did it, and the tree barely missed him, and they were good on their promise and converted to Christianity. Now in 384, there were a group of people that followed a person named Priscillian, and they were considered heretics in the Christian faith and deemed as so. And these bishops who considered them heretics and excommunicated them didn't just want them to be kicked out of the church, they wanted them to be executed by the Roman Empire. And so they convinced the emperor to execute these group of people that followed this man, Priscillian. Well, Martin thought that was wrong. The state shouldn't interfere in the business of the church, and it certainly shouldn't kill people for what they believe. And so he went personally and stayed at the emperor's residence till he convinced the emperor not to go through with the execution. And unfortunately, though, as soon as he left, the other people came back in, and these poor people were executed. After that, Martin was furious. He moved to get those bishops excommunicated, but later would pardon them and work with the emperor to get pardons for all the people who followed Priscillian. Therefore, no one else would ever be executed during this time in the church for what they did or did not believe. So we see through Martin's example, one of the things he holds up about service that was consistent through all his life is that he did what he felt was right, even though it was wildly unpopular when he came to the aid of people that didn't believe what the rest of the Christians at that time and place believed. So I think that's one thing that it means when we say service. Service is doing what is right, even in the face that it might not be popular what everyone else in your group is doing at the time. Now, another veteran that holds up this idea of service and helps us kind of discern what it means is talked about in our gospel reading this morning, which comes from the Gospel of Luke. And we don't know this person's name, we only know this person by his rank in the Roman army, which is that of centurion. Now, the centurion has a slave in his household that is sick. And he hears about Jesus coming into his town, and he knows of Jesus' ministry of healing. So he asks some of the Jewish elders of his town to go to Jesus and ask Jesus to come and heal his servant. And the Jewish elders are happy to do this, because this centurion has been a great benefactor and friend to them in the Jewish community. He's even helped them get a synagogue and had it built. So after hearing about how noble a person the centurion is, Jesus goes to his house to heal his servant. But as he's approaching the centurion's house, the centurion sends some of his friends out to meet Jesus en route. And his friends stop Jesus and give him this message, saying that the centurion knows that all you have to do is say the word, and his servant will be healed. You don't need to come any further. You don't need to be a part of his house, because the centurion felt that Jesus was a noble man, and he would disgrace him by bringing him under his Gentile roof. And so Jesus is just sort of awestruck by this man's humility and this man's faith. And so the miracle that happens is really kind of a back seat to the real point of the story of why Luke includes it in the gospel, and that is of the centurion's faith, and how he trusted that all Jesus had to do was say the word and his servant would be healed. Now, his faith is not just remarkable, but the centurion's humility in this whole process is absolutely remarkable as well. Because while others bragged about all the good things that he had done, he in no shape or form felt like Jesus owed him anything. He came to Jesus with humility and respect, asking him to do him this gracious favor, not just thinking he deserved it on merit or that he was owed anything in the first place. And so another aspect of service that our centurion sort of highlights for us, this idea of humility, of doing something simply to do it, not worrying about what you'll get in return, not doing something or expecting something because of your merit or what you feel you have earned, but just humbly doing what you feel someone else needs you to do for them. And the third example I hold up to you this morning is a family story of a veteran in my family. This man returned home from World War I back to where my people are from, South Mississippi, and started his career, as was his family's custom, of being a cattle farmer. But cattle farmer is not the most lucrative business at time, so to keep a roof over his head, he was also an orderly at the VA hospital in Gulfport, Mississippi. And there's a couple stories that circle around about this, but what would happen occasionally, as he would go about his orderly work and his farming, every once in a while, a Sunday after church, when he wasn't on duty, he would go down to the VA in Gulfport, and he would check out all the men that were on a special floor because they were shell-shocked, as they called it back then. And he would take all these guys in his car, and he'd bring them out to his farm, and he'd just let them spend the day on his farm, being outside, being in nature, having a sense of peace and relaxation. And when asked why he did this, he would just say, well, they don't need to be cooped up in that hospital their whole life. They need to have a chance to be outside, to get out of there and feel the fresh air and feel the grass underneath their feet. And so the third veteran today, as we look at the idea of service, holds up the idea that service is also about being compassionate. When we see someone in need, something, even if it's a small gesture, or simply helping someone get some fresh air. That is another aspect of service. So today, as we look and reflect upon service, what service means to our country, and we honor those who have served, it's important for us in the Christian faith to think about what that word means for us. And these three stories I shared with you this morning give us three different ideas of what service means. Doing what is right, doing it in humility, and doing it out of compassion. And I think if we try to strive for those three things, we will live into this idea of service in the Christian faith and our call to follow Jesus. Amen.